The rail yard sat beyond the last streetlight of the town, where asphalt gave way to gravel and the air smelled like old metal and rain-soaked wood. Once, it had been the backbone of the region. Freight trains rolling in day and night, workers shouting over the clatter of steel wheels. Now it was nothing more than a rusted skeleton. Signal towers leaned like broken teeth, tracks disappeared into weeds, and boxcars sat frozen in time, their doors half open like mouths that had tried to scream. People passed it every day, but no one really looked anymore. Locals avoided the place without ever admitting why. Parents warned their kids not to wander too close, not because it was dangerous, but because it was nothing worth seeing. The rail yard didn't make the news. It didn't attract explorers. Even the police treated it like a dead zone. No patrols, no cameras, no reports worth filing. It was as if the land itself had been erased from responsibility. And that silence became part of daily life. Over the years, small things started to feel off. A child's shoe found near the tracks with no footprints around it. A backpack caught on a broken fence, perfectly clean despite weeks of rain. Every time something strange appeared, it was quietly removed by morning. No yellow tape. No questions asked. The town learned to forget faster than it learned to worry, and the rail yard remained untouched, unchanged, and unexplained. At night, the place transformed. Fog rolled in thick and low, hugging the rails like it knew where they led. The wind carried metallic groans from the boxcars, even when nothing was moving. People living nearby swore their dogs refused to face the tracks after sunset, pulling hard on their leashes, whining, shaking. Some claimed they heard distant clanking, slow, deliberate, like a train easing into a stop that never came. What no one realized was that the rail yard wasn't abandoned at all. It was simply waiting. Waiting in plain sight, hidden by neglect, protected by indifference. While the town slept, the rusted tracks still remembered their purpose, and somewhere among the silent freight cars, something was already awake, watching, listening, and counting. The case files didn't look connected at first. Different years, different counties, different police departments. Some reports were handwritten, others digitized, many incomplete. A few were stamped runaway, others marked no evidence of foul play. But when the federal analyst laid them all out across her desk, something began to itch at the back of her mind. The disappearances weren't random. They only looked that way because no one had ever bothered to line them up side by side. When she plotted the locations on a map, the pins formed a rough circle, uneven, imperfect, but unmistakable. At the center of that circle sat the same place every time, the abandoned rail yard. Every missing child had last been seen within a short drive of it. Gas stations, bus stops, school routes, parks near old tracks. It wasn't coincidence. It was proximity. And once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. The timelines made it worse. The disappearances spiked during certain months, always aligning with periods when freight traffic was officially inactive. No scheduled trains. No maintenance crews. No eyes. The analyst cross-referenced weather reports and noticed foggy nights appeared again and again in the records. Conditions perfect for sound to travel poorly. Perfect for movement to go unnoticed. Perfect for mistakes to be erased by morning. She brought the pattern to her superiors, expecting urgency. Instead, she was met with silence. Her emails went unanswered. Meetings were postponed, then cancelled. One supervisor warned her, off the record, that reopening closed cases caused unnecessary noise. Another suggested she focus on more current investigations. The message was clear. This wasn't something they wanted dug up. Late one night, while reviewing files alone, she discovered something even more disturbing. Several reports from different states had identical wording, same phrasing, same typos, same closing sentence. Different departments shouldn't write the same way. It meant the files had been edited. Standardized. Someone had reached into multiple jurisdictions and smoothed the edges, making 112 separate disappearances look ordinary. And whoever had done it knew exactly where not to look. The railroad maintenance worker had kept his mouth shut for nearly 20 years. He told himself it was just stress, that working nights around dead tracks messed with a person's head. Every shift started the same way. Clock in, grab the flashlight, walk the rails no one else bothered with. The darkness out there wasn't normal darkness. It felt thick, like it pressed back when you moved through it, swallowing the beam of his light before it could travel far. The first time he heard it, he froze. It was faint, barely louder than the wind, but it didn't move like the wind did. It rose and fell, breaking in short, uneven gasps. Crying. Not one voice, several. Young voices. He stood there, heart pounding, listening as the sound drifted between the boxcars, bouncing off metal walls. When he shouted, the crying stopped instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. Night after night, the sounds returned. Always after midnight. Always when the yard was supposed to be empty. Sometimes it sounded like whispers, sometimes like muffled sobs. Once, he heard a single word, help, so clear it made his hands shake. He reported it once, quietly, to his supervisor. The man didn't even look up from his paperwork. Just told him not to wander off his assigned path and to stop imagining things. One night, against his better judgment, he followed the noise. It led him to a line of freight cars that weren't on any inventory list. One car stood apart from the rest, its metal newer, cleaner. The door wasn't sealed. He slid it open just enough to peer inside. The smell hit him first. Sterile, recycled air. The floor was spotless. No rust. No dust. No graffiti. Like the car had been scrubbed clean every day. He didn't see anyone inside, but he felt watched. The temperature dropped suddenly, and his flashlight flickered. Then he noticed marks along the inner wall, scratches, low and uneven, like they'd been made by small hands. Before he could step back, a deep metallic clang echoed down the yard. Another car door slamming shut. When he spun around, the car he'd opened was already sealed, the lock cold and solid under his fingers, as if it had never been touched at all. The operation was launched without press releases, without sirens, without even a paper trail that could be traced later. A handful of federal agents were pulled from unrelated cases and told only what they needed to know. No phones. No names spoken aloud. The rail yard was referred to by a number, not a location, as if labeling it might give it power. Every briefing ended the same way. Assume you're being watched. Official records claimed the last train to use those tracks had been dismantled years ago, its parts sold for scrap. But thermal imaging told a different story. On cold nights, a long, narrow heat signature moved slowly through the yard, too steady to be animals, too large to be machinery left running by accident. The shape followed the rails exactly, stopping at the same points, lingering longer in certain sections, as if waiting for something invisible to catch up. Drones were deployed after midnight, their rotors barely audible above the wind. From above, the yard looked dead, but beneath the surface, warmth pulsed through the ground. Agents watched monitors in silence as clusters of heat appeared, disappeared, then reappeared somewhere else entirely. It wasn't random movement. It was controlled, organized. Whatever was down there knew the blind spots better than the people trying to observe it. Then came the audio feed. Low-frequency vibrations traveled through the tracks, picked up by ground sensors meant to detect structural stress. At first it sounded like distant thunder. Then the pattern sharpened, metal on metal, rhythmic and deliberate. A train was moving. Not fast. Not loud. Just enough to stay unnoticed. And it wasn't showing up on any rail authority system. When the signal lights flickered to life, lights that hadn't worked in decades, every agent felt it. Red shifted to green. Switches changed position on their own. The rails began to hum beneath their boots. Somewhere in the darkness, a horn sounded once, low and restrained, like a warning meant only for those who knew how to listen. The breach happened just before dawn, when the rail yard was at its quietest. Agents moved between the tracks in silence, weapons lowered but ready, guided by thermal readings glowing red on their screens. The ground beneath their boots felt wrong, too warm, too solid for something that was supposed to be empty. When the first section of track was lifted, a hidden steel hatch revealed itself, perfectly flush with the gravel, invisible unless you knew exactly where to stand. As the hatch opened, a rush of stale, recycled air escaped, carrying the faint smell of disinfectant and old fear. A ladder descended into darkness, lit only by the agents' headlamps. Below them stretched a narrow corridor lined with thick concrete walls and soundproof panels. No echoes. No distant noise from above. This place had been designed so nothing, no screams, no cries, could ever reach the surface. The first child they found didn't move. He sat against the wall, knees pulled tight to his chest, eyes wide but unfocused. When an agent spoke softly, the boy flinched like he'd been struck. Others emerged slowly from hidden rooms, some barefoot, some clutching scraps of fabric like they were priceless. A few reached out, touching the agents' uniforms, as if they needed proof that someone real was standing there. Deeper inside, the compartments grew larger. Rows of low beds. Timetables posted on the walls, marked not with dates but with symbols. Food trays stacked neatly, sanitized and measured. Everything about the space suggested routine, control, and long-term planning. Some children appeared older than their missing posters. Others were so young they couldn't remember their last names, only fragments of lullabies and shadows passing outside locked doors. As the evacuation began, agents counted and recounted, afraid the number would change if they blinked. 90. 100. 112. Above ground, the sky began to lighten, but below, the lights flickered for just a second, long enough for a few children to look back toward the darkness they were leaving, eyes fixed on something the agents couldn't see, something that hadn't followed them out. The rescue should have detonated across the nation's headlines, but it didn't. There were no live press conferences, no names released, no footage of agents carrying children into the light. What little information leaked out was vague and carefully worded. An ongoing investigation, sensitive details, no further comment at this time. Families were reunited behind closed doors, escorted through back entrances, warned not to speak to media if they wanted things to stay simple. Inside the task force, the mood shifted from relief to suspicion. Evidence logs began changing after they were submitted. Timestamps didn't match. Security footage from the rail yard went missing in chunks, hours erased, replaced by static. When agents asked for copies, they were told the files had been corrupted. Too many failures, too many accidents, all pointing in the same direction. One name kept surfacing in internal memos, always redacted, always followed by silence. A senior official with clearance that crossed agencies, someone who could reroute funds, suppress alerts, and authorize edits without leaving fingerprints. When investigators tried to schedule an interview, they were informed the official was on indefinite leave. The office assigned to them was already empty, desk cleared, computer wiped clean down to factory settings. Meanwhile, witnesses began retracting statements. The maintenance worker who had first reported the sounds suddenly claimed he'd imagined everything. His signed affidavit vanished from the system. When an agent visited his home, the man refused to open the door, speaking through it in a shaking voice, insisting he wanted to be left alone. He said people had been calling him at night, reminding him how fragile memories could be. The deeper the investigation pushed, the quieter everything became. Fewer emails, fewer meetings, fewer answers. It was as if the entire case was being wrapped in layers of bureaucratic padding, softened, dulled, made safe for forgetting. And somewhere within that silence, the sense grew stronger that the operation hadn't been stopped, only paused, protected by the same unseen hand that had kept it alive for so long. The rail yard was officially sealed within weeks. Concrete barriers blocked every access road. Warning signs were bolted into the ground. Surveillance cameras were installed at every angle, feeding live footage to multiple agencies at once. On paper, the place was dead for good. But locals noticed something strange almost immediately. The nights grew louder, not quieter. Metal groaned when there was no wind. The ground vibrated faintly, like a distant engine idling far below. 3 months later, a single alert triggered at 2:17 a.m. One camera flickered, then stabilized, revealing a stretch of track that hadn't been touched since the lockdown. Slowly, almost politely, a freight car rolled into frame. No locomotive. No visible force pulling it. Just steel wheels turning on rusted rails, moving at a steady, deliberate pace. The timestamp glitched twice before correcting itself. Inside the monitoring room, no one spoke. The car's exterior looked newer than anything else in the yard, its paint unmarked, its surface clean. As it passed beneath a light pole, something appeared on the small, square window, handprints. Fresh, pressed hard from the inside. Too small to belong to an adult. They stayed there for several seconds, sliding downward slightly, before disappearing as the car drifted out of frame. Audio sensors picked up a low-frequency hum traveling through the tracks, identical to the vibrations recorded before the rescue. Then came something worse, a brief spike in higher frequencies, irregular and uneven. Analysts argued over what it was until one of them muted the room and isolated the sound. It wasn't mechanical. It was breathing. Dozens of overlapping breaths, rising and falling in no clear rhythm. When agents arrived on site minutes later, the yard was empty. No train. No disturbed gravel. No warm rails. Just silence and blinking red lights. As they reviewed the footage again, frame by frame, they noticed something they'd missed the first time. The handprints weren't reaching outward. They were pushing against the glass from inside, as if whatever made them wasn't trying to escape, but trying to be seen. The case file was stamped closed, boxed up, and buried under layers of policy and silence. Officially, the threat was gone. Officially, the rail yard was just another abandoned place on a forgotten map. But trains still pass through nearby towns, and sometimes, very late at night, people swear they hear a horn where no tracks exist. Low, slow, almost careful. Parents hold their children a little tighter when the fog rolls in. Maintenance crews refuse overnight shifts near inactive lines. And every so often, a surveillance camera glitches for just one frame, long enough to show a dark rail car that shouldn't be there, waiting. Because the truth is, 112 children were rescued. But no one ever proved who built the system. No one ever found who ran the train. And rail yards were never meant to be watched forever.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.